Welcome to the All In Podcast, the show that explores how the top real estate entrepreneurs have gone all in on their businesses. I'm your host, David Morse, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, and I invite you to come along with us as we explore the stories of the most elite professionals in the game today to learn how they went all in and how you and I can do the same. So I just have to ask, are you all in? All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the All In Podcast, episode 28.
That's right.
Holy smokes, episode 28. So good to have you guys with us. I'll be your co-host today. I'm your co-host. I got to get into this, man. What's wrong?
Get your head right, David. Come on.
Yeah,
we're in studio today.
Get my head in the game. All right. I'm your host, David Moore, CEO, team leader of Keller Williams Arizona Realty in Scottsdale and North Phoenix, with my co-host, Joe Quattrucci, the man, the director of growth at Chris & Cole Network. And today's guest, I'm really excited. Someone that I was just recently introduced to and was really impacted by, joins us in studio today, Aaron Hodson.
Great to be here, guys. It's a pleasure to be on it. I mean, I thought I should come to sit with Joe Rogan, but anyway.
There we go. We did tell him to say that, actually. So, Aaron, tell us a little bit about yourself. I want you what is your business? Who are you? Why do people need to listen for the next 35 minutes?
Wow, I thought this was a 3-hour show. This is going to take a little while. But
oh, boy.
Who I am, I mean, obviously you can tell by the accent. I mean, I wasn't born here. I was born in New Zealand. I mean, I left there as soon as I could, and that's a New Zealand thing. They encourage you to get out of the country and go and spread your wings and learn some business. Got into real estate when I was 21. Typical story, how you get into real estate. I bought an investment property and my lender said, hey, you'd be great in real estate, and go figure, I jumped into real estate. Made a lot of mistakes, but had a very good start in real estate. My first year in the business, made just over $1 million in commission. Not a skill set. It was just I outworked every other realtor.
In your first year?
In my first year, yeah. So this is the challenging part, I think, for most people, is when they hear things like that, they think it's a monthly thing. So the understanding is the first 7 months of my career, I didn't earn a dollar. And I always remember not long before I got my first paycheck, a couple of days earlier, I got a letter from the bank, and it wasn't to say, hey, we'd like to invest your money. It was saying you have no money. So, I got in, I was young, I was pretty green, but, I was just a very hard worker. Just stuck to the process and, did just over $1 million in commission. Average sale price of about 250, so it was high volume. Within 3 years, I was averaging about 10 transactions a month. Now, this is where the truth starts to come out of me. I was miserable, hated my job. I was working 90 hours a week, thinking, dumbest job I can ever have if I've got to work this hard. So I made a decision. I was either going to change the way I did my business, or I was going to get out of it and go and do something different. And, I'd always been a very entrepreneurial. Started a company when I was 17, colossal screw up. It was a failure. But I learned a lot of lessons. So I thought, if I really restructure the way I run my business, it's either going to change what I'm doing, or it's going to force me out of it. And I was chasing time. So I wasn't chasing growing a high volume business. I was chasing just not having to work the 90 hours. And within a year, I started averaging about 60 transactions a month, and I was working probably half the hours. So just a very different understanding of how to run real estate. And I think that's something I've learned in my career as well, is that, majority of realtors are very good salespeople, but it's the business side of things that tends to be the biggest weakness. Managing volume is a skill, and it's something that you've really got to work on and constantly maintain to keep it. Because we all know we have great months, but maintaining a long-term high-volume business is tough. So I did that I was a number one agent in the country for probably 7 or 8 years. But in the middle of that, I sort of decided a good idea would be to buy the real estate brokerage that I worked for. So I paid a ton of money for myself because I was 80% of the company's volume. That was those days, when you get home and you think, what the hell have I done? That was a turning point. But I wanted to, grow a brokerage. So over the next 2 years, I opened 2 branches. We had about 85 agents working across the 2 branches. We were doing close to $2 billion a year in sales volume. So I had a lot of high-performing realtors. So I literally was a full-time psychologist. I was managing bad attitudes and just people just worried about everything.
You know my world.
And so people, I always say, I've removed the word about being a coach. And I personally don't think that's what I am. I've built a great business that I've had the ability to show people. I didn't build a coaching business. So it's a very, very different thing. And so for me, understanding how to run that was very different. So, I like to think I'm more of a therapist than I am a coach. And I think that's really what we are. And so I always think what I do is more from the business strategy, because skill and selling things, I think everybody's got that inside them, but running a business and understanding how to diversify and sort of adapt to the certain things that happen is always the big challenge. We get very stuck. So that's that side of it. I think it was early 2008. I made a decision to sell my business. Market was at its peak. We were doing incredibly well. It was just time for me to do something different. And in the honest truth, I kind of got a little bit bored with it. I was managing a lot of high, people. It was getting a little Groundhog Day-ish for me, and I sort of found myself at a cap as to what I could do. And then I sold out, and 3 months later, the market crashed. So I say, touch wood, I predicted it. I had no idea. It was just time for me to move on. I then bought an interest in Harcourts International, which I think at the moment is probably fifth or sixth largest real estate group in the world, doing about $38 billion a year in volume. At that point, they were only in New Zealand and Australia. So I've actually got a good connection with KW because I met the Osbornes right back in the good old days when they were growing it globally, and had a fair bit to do with them back then as friends. So I've travelled a little bit with them back in those days, but that's gone back a lot of years now. So when we start to realise we're getting older.
We definitely have to get we have to get David Osborne on the show.
Yeah, so that's a long time ago. We probably both look very different now compared to what we did 17, 18 years ago. I was thinking about taking a few years off and just, doing some investing and things like that. And after about 3 weeks, I drove myself insane. So I was tasked, I took up the international CEO Harcourts International role, and over the next decade opened about, I think, close to 900 offices with them in 10 countries, and came to the US in 2010, opened 60 offices, recruited about 3,500 agents, sold that in 2014. And since then, my predominant part of my business was speaking, obviously, before COVID hit. That sort of stopped overnight. So I was a phenomenal traveler to sitting at home in board shorts all day. But it was a great turning point in the business. We had the ability to do some other things. But since I sold out of Harcourts, I've had a consultancy company where I tend to work predominantly with realtors and lenders who are doing above 100 million a year in volume. And that's because of the business strategy. That they're at a point now where it's about managing people, time, how to run a business that can control volume. Through that process, though, we launched a company called Sellwell, which was that intermediate, which is, I think everybody just needs a better starting point. So I basically put every single thing that I did in my business, from how I communicated with people, my time management strategies, every single thing I did based on the mistakes that I made. These are things that I did. This is what I changed to make it work, to be able to have a customizable thing for the individual. And we launched that. That program's called Sellwell. We launched that, probably middle of last year. And since then, we've had about just over 2,000 realtors go through that. Pretty proud to say at the moment we're averaging just under 3 transactions a person per month, which is pretty good. Fantastic. For the numbers. So yeah. I'm probably more impressed with that than anybody, to be honest with you, because given that the average realtor is doing 2.5 deals a year, in the country. So that's been a pretty proud thing. But for me, it was just giving people a better opportunity. I got sick of going to events and having realtors come up saying, God, I can't afford to do this, or I can't do that. But investing their last dollar in coaching when they really could be doing something completely different. So, or marketing or lead gen or things like that. There are better ways. And I think the underlying message behind that is everything works. It just doesn't work for everybody. You just got to find those things that work for you and stick with them till you get the results. And I learned that the hard way in my business.
So kind of on that note, there's obviously a lot there that we're going to unpack in the next few minutes. I want to kind of go back to the beginning, that first year in real estate. Yeah. I'm somebody that specializes in working with newer agents their first few years in real estate. And you mentioned over $1 million in commission your first year, but the first 7 months there was nothing.
Not a single thing.
Walk us through what that year looked like. I mean, what was the transition that happened halfway through the year, and what did the first 7 months look like, and what did the last 5 months look like, and kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because this is where I pride myself on being very open and honest, because everybody likes to give people the story. It was so consistent. It was easy. I started talking. That's a load of crap. That's not what happened. It was miserable. I had a lot of days where I was thinking to myself, what the hell am I doing? Like, nothing's happening. But if there was one thing, if you were interviewing my mother, one of the things she would always say is, he's the most persistent, stubborn little shit you'll ever meet in your life. And I think for me, that was the most consistent thing. And I was lucky enough that I taught myself a rule that understanding human psychology is a big part of me, I suppose, is understanding people, which is our product. And I thought to myself, if I'm going to do anything, I'm going to do it for 90 days or until somebody slams a door in my face. Now, granted, I had a lot of doors slammed in my face, but I need to prove to myself that something's not going to work. Because what I saw was happening consistently with a lot of new realtors. They'll try it once or twice, not get a result, and then shift and move. And with anything that we do, it generally takes 90 days before you see any form of sort of responses or results. Because real estate's about timing, not about us showing up at the right time. If you're more present, more frequent, eventually you get your timing right. So the honest truth behind it, first 7 months was miserable. But I was young enough and dumb enough not to get burnt by it. I just kept doing it. I just kept working away, and then eventually just really started to fall together. And I think it's just that persistence. I think if people don't quit, we've all seen it. We've all been in this business long enough. We see new realtors come in, they work their ass off for 6 months, They decide to quit, and then the very next couple of weeks, business starts to come in the door. The leads start to happen. I think that's the real key to it. It was a tough year. I think I was young enough to be stubborn enough to keep sticking with it. But I mean, honest truth behind it, I outworked every other realtor 2 hours to one. So when they were at home, I was coming back, I was still working. Interesting enough, funny side story, but there was a young guy that started at the same time I did. His name, funny enough, it's no relation, but his name's Ben Benaki. So it's not actually any relation to the financial side of it. He actually was the guy that ended up buying my business. But him and I used to live on the same way home, and I used to drive past his house when I went home. And if his car wasn't at home, I used to think he was working, so I'd go back to the office and keep working. And I ended up finding out a few years later that he knew what I was doing, and he'd park his car behind the house. I do owe him a lot of favors, because I always say deep down inside he's responsible for a lot of the reasons why I would go back to the office very late at night.
Interesting.
I just love the competitive fight.
Right.
That's so good.
Yeah, I wasn't going to let him beat me, but yeah, he ended up being very, very successful himself. But I mean, I think that's the competition's great, but the competition with yourself is stronger. And that was one thing, is I wasn't going to let myself fail doing it. I didn't have a lot of choices. It was made a big decision to get into it. And if I was going to do it, I was going to give it everything. And unfortunately, that's probably the biggest downfall, is we get in because we want our own time. We want to be our own boss, but we'd fire ourselves if we were getting paid to do the job that most of us are doing.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely is. And what I'm hearing you say, if we kind of like take that apart, is it sounds like you were doing the right things for those first 7 months, right? So if you're in your first year in the business, I don't want you to hear like, oh, well, I'm just going to kick back and relax for the first 6 months because in the last 6, I'm going to make $1 million. No, you were doing the right things. And then the timing ended up being right in the back 6 months, and I think that's
well, the fear factor in it too, and the realization. I was so close to bankruptcy before I got my first paycheck. It was ridiculous. But at 21, you don't actually understand what that is. But the life lesson in that for me was, if you just stick with it, it'll eventually work. I could either sit back and worry about the money, or I can just keep doing it, because if I stop, the result was still going to be the same. We obviously get a lot smarter as we get older and we look back on things. And I clearly wasn't.
Some people do.
Yeah, clearly wasn't thinking that at 21, but. Yeah, I just think it's an interesting world. But I think the other thing I remembered is I was very focused on the things that I knew would work. So I wasn't into trying a lot of stuff where I wasn't really convinced that the result was there. I wasn't going out doing what other people were doing that weren't getting results. Like if they weren't doing it. So I was sticking to the things where I could really control the results, the outcome. It was always putting me in front of people. So I just stuck with what I knew was going to work. Yeah. And didn't deviate from it. Yeah.
Man. Okay. So I've heard you in the few times that we've been together talk a lot about the difference between being a salesperson and being a business owner. I want you to talk to me about that, because that's something that is a cornerstone in the way that I talk to agents getting in this business, or maybe they've been in the business for years, but they don't know why they can't break through that ceiling. Yep. The thing that I draw on the board is always Kiyosaki's, cash flow quadrant or whatever. And I say to them, most companies are probably going to teach you how to get to this self-employed piece, right? They may not teach you how to get to the business owner side of the thing, where you're trading money for money, really. Money in the form of leverage and money in the form of just straight up investing, right? So talk to us about how you differentiate between salesperson and business owner, and what you think are some of the common pitfalls that agents fall into.
Okay, salesperson wings it and a business owner has a plan for it. That's probably the biggest difference that I see. Is a salesperson gets lucky and a business owner plans for their success. And I think the day we start in real estate, we're the CEO of our own company. So there is no transition from being a salesperson to a business owner. The day you start selling real estate, you're a business owner. You're the CEO of your own company. You're not on a salary. You're responsible for every single, some maybe, but in most cases we're not. But I think that's the reality. I mean, you've got to step up from day one. And I mean, I used to have a question I used to always ask, a lot of my people, if you had to get paid with your own money for the job you're doing right now, should you keep your job? And most people got into real estate because they wanted the freedom of time. And the one thing I will say is real estate does create a phenomenal business where you can have freedom and time, providing you put the first 2 or 3 years in. You can't start there.
Right.
And, I was working, like I said, my first 2 or 3 years, I was 90 plus hours a week because I was not going to fail. And I think that's the mistake, is that, honestly, the reason I got into real estate when I was very young, I always knew that was where I was going to go, because one of my best friends when I was growing up, his mum was actually one of the top realtors in the little town that I grew up in New Zealand. Now that obviously in other worlds, it's probably not such a top realtor, but I always remember thinking to myself as a kid, like, I don't care what she does for a job, but whatever she does, that's what I want to do when I grow up, because all she does is drive around in nice cars and drink coffee all day. And I thought to myself, Maggie Dixon, she's still in real estate today. And I always remember, whatever she does, that's what I want to do. She just seems to have control over everything. But the reality of it is when we tend to have control over everything, we always take the easy option, which is I'll sit here and think about something rather than go out there and do it. You think about your business like a startup company. You've got to get investment, got to get investors. Now, our investors are potential clients. You look at somebody starting a company, how hard do they hustle to get money? revert that to a realtor. How hard do they hustle to get people to invest in what they're doing, which is their own personal business of being a realtor? That's the business mentality. It's looking at things very, very different. And I think historically, though, when we look at real estate, it is that transaction to transaction. And that's just historically what we've seen in this industry. And for me, I just saw an opportunity where I could make a ton of money if I could have multiple things, transactions happening at once. And then you look at each thing. Every time an opportunity presents itself, that's your greatest opportunity to build more. What most people do is they see a transaction, a listing or a buyer, they get it sold, they close it, and then they start again. Effectively, you start a company every 30 to 60 days. Now, nobody's going to get successful doing that, where once you get a product that people like, you start selling more of it. And that's, for me, was what, once I created an experience that people liked, I just started elevating that experience and selling more of that experience.
So are you saying that you systematized your processes, you were able to deliver a consistent product to your consumers over time, and so you basically were just able to duplicate that experience one after another?
It's genius. Yeah, exactly what I said.
So is this about, I mean, so how do you actually, do you document it? Do you actually write it down, or you're writing it down in an SOP or something to that effect that you're actually following?
Degree, but funny enough, the biggest process behind it was let's be real clear on this. When people pay me to go and do business plans, so I'm going to contradict what I'm about to say, is I think business planning is bad for a new realtor, because one of our biggest challenges is our ability to execute. And I think most people love these big, long lists of stuff to do. Now, business planning is essential in growing a business, so please make sure you follow that. But teaching ourselves to execute is the number one challenge that most of us had. Now, I was lucky enough to work out early in my career that my biggest weakness was my ability to execute. I'd have a long list of stuff. I knew deep down inside only half of it was going to get remotely close to getting done. So I reinvented my business plan, which is I do it from Monday through Friday. Because if I give myself less to do, I've got less room for failure. So I would do Monday morning, I'd sit down, work out exactly what needed to be executed by Friday. And on Friday, I'd review it. And my number one thing was not looking at the stuff that worked. I'd look at the stuff that didn't. And I'd look at what needed to be improved, removed, or taken out of my business. Because it's sad but true, but I say that pretty much most realtors in this business right now, 90% of what they do every day should not be being done. They're just doing stuff, and that's how I worked out how to get the hours. It's, human nature is a crazy thing. You give the average person 8 hours to do a 2-hour job, they'll take 8 hours to do it. Mm-hmm. And so I used to just shorten the time frames on everything. If I'm going to do this, how can I do that in, less time? And ironically, it depends who you ask, but I still believe one of my best talents is I'm the laziest person you'll ever meet. And not because I won't do anything. It's just everything I do, I want to isolate it and say, how could I do that quicker and get better value? Because my number one asset is time. Yeah. And if I don't constantly try and find more time for my business, I'm restricted on how far I can go. Yeah. And that's really the philosophy behind it. So, and documenting it was more about getting rid of the documents and having a very fine-tuned plan that I couldn't sidestep. And generally, most good plans are 3 or 4 very pronounced steps that you can't deviate from. The longer and more long-winded the plan is, it becomes like a GPS. If we get lost, we have to stop because we've got nowhere to go. And if you give people the end result more than you the step-by-step goal, they'll find their way to get there. So I spend a lot more looking further down the track, saying, right, let's build the plan, because everybody's going to do it different. And if people can't replicate exactly what I did in their business, if they get stuck, they stop. And I think that's the biggest downside, is if people want to just follow that real finite plan. But I mean, I've worked with thousands of realtors over the years, and not one of them does the same thing. It's always different, and they'll take a similar activity and find their way of making it work.
There's something that he said that reminded me of something that you say, Joe. Like, when you first getting into this business, your job description is just to go get a client. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not to formulate this huge business plan, like, at all. It's like your job is to lead generate to get a client. Mm-hmm. Like that's it. Go do that. Go figure out.
And I'll admit, as a young and up and coming real estate coach, I made a mistake early on in my career of giving my newest agents and clients too many things to do that were not going to lead directly to income. And so I've learned very much what you're saying. You've got to focus on those income producing activities out first. And as you get your business going and you get some traction, now you can transition kind of more into the business planning aspect and the growth aspect. And one thing you said, Aaron, that I wanted to kind of get a little bit more insight on that I wrote down here is you've got to teach yourself to execute. And so I'm wondering, can you just talk to us a little bit about that? Is that a matter of inspiration, motivation, discipline, or what is your philosophy on people executing what they know they should be doing, but they're keeping themselves busy with other work, knowing that they're avoiding their most important stuff?
It's an interesting one. It's like, how do you teach yourself to do that? You get very comfortable or uncomfortable with pain. And I think that the ability to execute is a bigger desire for the result. And I think it's interesting. I think most people just get given stuff to do because we like to keep them busy. I mean, if we keep people busy, they're not going to get distracted and they'll stay on it, and eventually they'll get lucky. Now, that for me just doesn't work. So the ability to execute is more about, I'm never, ever going to see the result in something unless I take it through to the end. And I think that's driven by my want to see whether something actually works. And I mean, there's the old saying, you can't 95% sell a house because the last 5% is when you get paid. But most people do less than 5% of the job.
I like that.
That's really what it comes down to. I mean, the ability to exit is driven internal because I think for me, it's just that stubbornness of I cannot, really determine whether this is a good activity unless I finish it. And then there's only way I'm going to be able to determine whether I need to make some changes. It's like finding that last piece of the puzzle.
Right.
Your jigsaw's not complete unless you put that last piece in. Although you know what it is, the last piece is completion. And I think whether I was born with that or it's just who I am as a person. And I think with all the the really high producing clients I work with, that's always the biggest fundamental flaw is that we feel good if we've got a lot of things going on. And that sort of subsidizes or gets rid of the stuff that we don't finish. And so my challenge was give myself one or two things to do and have a very, very fine line between success and failure. Most people who sit down with a business plan, I don't think in my career I've ever seen anybody 100% complete a business plan. We'll be lucky if we get close to 20%. What say we give people a business plan with one thing on it? They can't screw it up. They're either going to do it or they're not.
Right.
You're going to find out your ability to execute. So that's where the whole weekly strategy came from. Is like, unless we can teach ourselves the habit to finish or execute what's in front of us, a business plan is going to be worthless.
I love that.
We just have a great day of talking about wonderful dreams that we're going to have in the future. Yeah. And we all know it just doesn't come about.
So much good stuff over the last 10 minutes. I think everyone needs to go back and listen to all of it again. I mean, another thing that you said, like everyone gets into real estate for the 3 F words, right? And you can steal
the same word 3 times because we use the F word all the time. Right?
Exactly.
It's not
exactly.
the same one. Okay, sorry,
yeah, not that one. Other than that one, flexibility, freedom, financial gain, right? Yep. Every agent talks about those.
You know, you don't get the other two without the first one, right? Without the third one.
You don't get those, and you don't get flexibility without being the most treating this like the most inflexible corporate 9 to 5, 8 to 4 job, whatever you want to do. You do not get the freedom unless you treat yourself like a slave. Like, I mean, you've got to be chained to this business for a time to earn the right to move into those other things. I really believe that. And you brought that to light so well. I want to talk about scaling because to scale at the rate at which you did, I mean, just from running real estate businesses, consulting on real estate businesses, scaling other businesses in my short career, that is hugely challenging.
It is.
Yep. Talk to me about that because you mentioned at one point 60 transactions a month.
Yep.
Yeah.
It gives me goosebumps when you say it too, just so you know, because I was never thinking about that. It was more about how I did things. So, I mean, scaling is an interesting thing because when most people look at growing or scaling a business, they tend to look at like a graph, and it's a straight line that goes up, and that's the most misleading thing you'll ever see. And scaling is about that first year of seeing nothing and fine tuning what you do. And I'm going to give you a perfect example from the business consulting side, and I do a lot of consulting work in other industries as well. And so if I'm ever working with a company that's got a product they're trying to sell, and they want to start growing revenue, we don't go in and try and find more products to sell. We go and find what people buy and sell more of what people buy. So for me, that first 12 months of scaling a business is about fine-tuning exactly what your value proposition is, and you get that right before you go to the market. And if people start to slowly grow, they get a little bit of misleading information, like we get a little bit of luck and we get a couple extra transactions, and it's not scalable because you don't have a model that can handle multiple transactions. So what I was always looking to do is and for me, this is the future thinking thing. So whenever I do anything with a large company, I always go 5 years ahead and say, okay, where do you want to be? And let's just reverse engineer it. So if you want to do a business that does 50 transactions a month, you actually need to know what it takes to run a business doing 50 transactions. And if you try and implement things once you get there, it's a recipe for disaster because you're trying to fix a problem when it's there. You solve the problem before it happens. So what I would do is I'd look, okay, if I want to work 30 hours a week, which was what my goal was, so I wasn't trying to grow a business doing 60 transactions. I was just trying to prevent myself from working 90 hours. I thought, how do I fine tune everything that I do? Like, why do I spend 3 hours doing this when I should be able to do it in 2 hours? Now, if I can do it in 2 hours or 20 minutes, for example, then I could probably run another 10 or 15 transactions. The other thing that I had to work out very, very quickly was my product was not properties. I do not sell houses for a living. Any realtors that says they sell houses for a living needs to rethink what they do. My job is to get people to trust me enough and like me and respect me enough that they allow me to facilitate the transaction. So I worked out early what my product was. I needed to have more people that knew who I was and what I did for a job. And then I get a lot luckier because I can't just keep going to try and find that one person. And the other tip that I learned is if I remove time frame from everything, it changed the outcome dramatically because everybody that we looked at was more about, everybody that we look at as realtors is all designed around a paycheck. Like, how quickly can I get you into a transaction? Now, that's self-serving. It's driven by when we can get paid. So for me, I thought to myself, if you're thinking about doing anything in real estate while you're alive, you're going to be a client. And I would treat them like that. So whether you were 12 months away, 12 years, or 2 weeks, you got treated the same. Frequency of communication. And there's an interesting statement that I always use in my business. And every single thing that a realtor does for their clients during a transaction, how they negotiate, how they take care of them, how they communicate, it's a complete sign of their professionalism. It shows them what they're like as a professional realtor. Every single thing they do before and after is a complete sign of their character. And if you're not prepared to communicate with me before the transaction, like there's no paycheck involved, and keep doing that for the life of our relationship, you've just shown me what you're like, which is a desperate realtor looking for a paycheck. And I got way more referrals from people that I never did business with because of how I treated them than I ever did from those that I did business with. And that was just a massive life lesson. And I knew where my business was coming from 3 to 6 months before I did it because I had those people in my pipeline. And I think having a little bit more of a future vision is a great way to scale a business. You need to know where you're going before you're ever going to build a plan to get there. And I knew where I was going to be. I didn't know I was going to be at 60 deals, but I knew I was going to be working 30 hours a week.
So you mentioned a concept that we teach here a lot, and this just idea of a pipeline, right? That's a big thing. But I want to push back on something that you said, if I may. Please do. You said you treat every customer the same. Frequency of communication is up. Like, okay, what if an agent says, I build a huge business on client events, for instance. I can't possibly treat every single person in my world the same because I can't, my budget model doesn't support that, right? Like when you say that, is it just frequency of communication or is it frequency of opportunity? Do you have a VIP list within your database?
You've opened up literally one of the best conversations that we could ever have with anybody on this call, because this is one of the things that I think.
Call me Joe Rogan.
Well, that's it. Joe, I'm glad you invited me here today. So I was thinking about the other Joe, but it's interesting because I think one of my, whether it's a weakness or a strength, I don't know, and it depends who you talk to, but I think one of the big, I'll tell people the brutal, honest truth every time, and quite often I've had people say, well, hang on a minute, that can't be true because, I sold 5,500 transactions in my career and people say, there's no way you could stay in touch with that many people. And there's truth behind that because let's be really honest, 70% of the people that we do business with, we never want to see again. And that was one of the things that was really tough. Number one thing I had to work out, well, who are those people that would support me and back me? And you do have to be selective. So I wasn't communicating with that many people, but if you were in my pipeline and you were a potential client, I would communicate with you every 2-3 weeks minimum, just to stay in touch. It's speed, it's frequency. I personally don't think client events work. Now, I'm challenging you on this one. Only reason I say that is how am I going to get a personal connection with an individual? We're in a room full of 100 people. And I need you to trust me and like me. Now, where I did have some advantage, though, is one of the things that I used to do was at the start of the school holidays, I'd go and hire a movie theater and then I'd invite all my clients that had kids to the movies. And away I'd go and introduce myself and do all the things. Then what I found is those ones that I missed out having conversations with were a little offended. So what I did do was I'd set up an event and I wouldn't go. And then everybody at the event would talk about why they were there. And I got twice as many referrals because I just provided a great thing. When the realtor shows up, we know what it's about. You're here trying to get business. If you don't show up and you put on something that's of true value just because of who you are as a person, your character gets shown. Now, most realtors at a networking event won't get business from it because you're going around saying, pay me, pay me, pay me, pay me. Whereas if we let them say, look, this is for you because you're a good person, I enjoy working with you, response is different. Trial and error. Just remember, I spent a lot of money going the other way first. So, and I think that's how fine-tuning a business to get the results is there's some people that do phenomenal networking events. Just understand, it's huge. But as you get to a certain volume, it's really tough to go and do exactly what you said. And that's that letting go phase. There's certain things when volume starts to come in that enabled you to get to where you are will not continue on the journey with you because they're just not scalable when you get there. And scalability is sometimes more about letting go some of the things that you've done and implementing strategies that enable you to run volume. Yeah. But the one thing I'd never let go is what I did for my people and how I treated them.
Well, even as you talk about that, I think across the spectrum of the agents that I've consulted, and most of their businesses from a unit and a volume standpoint, they're all right in that same range. Yeah. When I think about the ones who have a bigger business than that rely heavily on something like client events, I know that their profit margin isn't where it needs to be. And so just to your point, it's really
It's interesting you say that though, because that's probably the biggest focus. For me, success is about money. And I see it all the time. We've all heard the stories. You see realtors that are doing $30, $40 million a year in volume. And when you get behind the scenes, they're making 80 to 100 grand a year. And business is not about the story that you tell somebody. It's about the freedom that you create in your life. And so everything I look at is the profitability. I mean, if I had an agent going through a program and they were doing 50 deals a year, it's not about taking them to 100. Sometimes it's about doing that 50 deals in half the amount of time. Success is digested by everybody different. And for me, that's really the thing that we've got to look at is there's certain things that I would do that wouldn't work for somebody else just because of who I am and my personality and how I present myself at those types of things. But most people, if they were really honest with themselves, would know that 90% of what they do isn't generating the result based on the time, the energy that they put in, but it makes them feel good. I mean, ironically, lose the idea that a realtor's a celebrity because we're not. Nobody really knows who we are until they need us. So what they need to know about us before any of that happens is who we are as a person. And then that changes everything. And I just one of my best lessons in real estate is I learned that the more you liked me, the more you forgave. And so the better my relationship was, the easier it was for me to do and get you exactly what you wanted. My clients are always looking for a reason to stay with me, not to go and find somebody else. Whereas if the relationship's built on what I think you can do for me, I'm going to screw you over on your commission. So, yeah.
The more you like me, the more you'll forgive me. I think that's...
Try it with your wife. She'll love it.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Maybe I won't forget to take out the trash tonight. I promise.
She probably won't give you the same response, but, I think it's just understanding it's not that hard. I think we overcomplicate it. I mean, the honesty behind it is, we can get our license to sell real estate in 6 weeks. We are, and understand where I'm going with this conversation, but we are the most overpaid industry in the world based on what we theoretically are educated to do. But really we have one talent, and that's the ability to connect and negotiate. All the rest of it, on paper, every realtor is exactly the same. And if we can really get people to understand and define what their value proposition, which is you as a person and what you can provide for people, it changes the game dramatically. And whether what people are learning is right or wrong, if everybody's doing exactly the same thing, we all look like fools. And if there was ever a time to be genuine, authentic, and go out there and show people who you are as a person, this industry craves it right now. What we've been through with COVID, all that sort of stuff, it's really exposed dishonesty. It's exposed people for not being true and authentic. And I think that's what's created what I believe is the biggest opportunity for us in the next 2 years. Is that I think there's going to be more opportunities in this industry in the next 2 years than we've ever had in our careers. We're all very young on this, this podcast. So I'm just saying that, but probably this is probably going to be the best 2 years that we've had probably for the last 2 decades. But the caveat is it's going to be tough. And if you can't run a business, the next 2 years will be really, really hard. If you can learn to run a business, the next 2 years could be groundbreaking for a lot of people because you will have the ability to have volume because there's so many different aspects of our industry that are opening up. We're not just focusing on a low interest rate. We've got people changing jobs, changing states. We've got people moving for different career opportunities just because of what we've been through. And if we're smart enough to take notice of that, there's going to be a lot of millionaires made in the real estate industry over the last 2 years. But sad part, probably going to have a lot of people go bankrupt as well.
So take that philosophy and give us your perspective on how that pertains to the future of real estate as it pertains to technology and the way that technology has already started to change the industry. Yeah. Where do you see that going in the next 2 to 5 years?
Backwards. Yeah. Because I tell you what, human nature is something you can't change. And we can automate certain things with technology. Now, I like technology, don't get me wrong, but I also found that technology screwed up some of the most important parts of my business. Is I could not build an effective relationship with somebody via technology. The only way I could do it was when you looked me in the eye and said, do I trust you with my keys? If people use technology as a way to start or grow a business, it's very, very damaging and very few people can make that work. If you use technology to maintain and manage a business through growth, it's life-changing. But I think most people leverage into technology as the first port because they think that's what's going to grow the business. But we sit behind a desk and we just spread out the same regurgitated stuff that everybody else does. That will work if the person actually knows who I am first. So I think technology, we feared it was going to take over our business. But what it's doing theoretically, because of the lack of understanding of how to use it, it's causing more damage. It's a necessary thing. It's always going to be a big part of it. But defining how it works in your business, it's going to be, technology is just something that's always going to be a part of it. How you use your CMAs, how you use your CRMs, all that sort of stuff is going to be critical to whether it's lead gen. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just got to have the right place in your business. And I think one of the things that I've done more than anything, especially with a lot of the real hyper producing clients, is remove a lot of technology that was in place of things that was their biggest moneymaker. I can't build a relationship with somebody by text messaging them. I've got to talk to them to actually see, and then I can maintain it with a text message or emails and things like that.
Sure, yeah. Starting point's always wrong.
And that was the philosophy of Sellwell. Give people the right starting point and then things will change. But technology in the future, it's only going to get bigger and better. That if we can teach people where to put it and how to utilize it, not lean on it as the savior, things will be very, very different. Very different.
Yeah.
I agree with that perspective. It's where the technology shows up in your business, how it's positioned, and lean into technology, but technology is not going to take the place of
it's going to assist it. It's not going to remove it. I mean, there was so much talk for many years about technology was going to make the realtor obsolete, and I won't repeat exactly what was going through my head when I heard that, but it wasn't very favorable. And I thought to me that is the biggest load of crap I've ever heard, because you cannot remove human interaction from one of the most personal and emotional things that people go through. You can actually smooth out the process. Now, if I use technology to give myself more face time with my client, you're onto a gold mine. If I use technology so I don't have to do face time with my client, you're going to go broke.
Right.
So use it in the right place. And, I think that's just really for me, it's interpretation. I mean, we look at it and go, great, I can automate everything. Well, no, you can't. You've got to make sure that what your automation does gives you the ability to spend more time on the things that you can actually know will make you money, which is when I'm looking somebody in the eye, that's the only opportunity I've got to do a transaction or actually have a transaction put into my pipeline. Yeah. I'm not going to do it on social media. I'm not going to do it on a text message, but in the room we can do it.
Couldn't agree more. And we don't and I'm not going to get into other brokerage models and things like that, except to say that is at the heart of what we teach here at my office. It is about being a tech-enabled agent. It's not about an agent enabling the technology. And we are fortunate to be led by a CEO and founder, Gary Keller, who still says, as a billionaire, I will go to my grave with realtor written on my headstone, right? And I think it mirrors exactly what you're saying. Man, where else do we want to go?
I'd love to get a little bit more information. You've obviously bought and sold several businesses very successfully. Talk us through, and you mentioned, just before the '08 recession that you had gotten out just in time. But then it sounds like you've done that a couple of more times. So I guess what is your advice to people that are in real estate now, but maybe know that they don't want to be in sales, for example, or build a team for the rest of their life? How do you work through growing what you're doing now, knowing that this might be only for the next 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, and then I plan to move on?
Well, if you build, it's like anything. This is probably the best business analogy. If you want to build a business, build something that somebody wants to buy. So, I think that's the challenge, is that, and real estate's also a very hard thing to sell. So I knew that when I bought my real estate company, I had to start creating, going out and selling a real estate company right now is one of the most challenging things. Nobody wants to buy them. And I love the fact that you said you successfully sold that. The process of selling a business is not easy, or it's got a lot of challenges with it. But I identified the people very early in my career who were going to buy my business. And so what I did is, the only people who know what my business is worth is the people that work in it. So I took 3 people that were in my company when I purchased it, and I taught them how to run it. And over the next 3 years, I created the people that bought it. And right at day one, we agreed on what the sale price was going to be based on a matrix. So when I sold it, irrespective of what the market was, we had a sale price, where'd everything go. So I built a whole matrix around, if you want to get in, this is what it's going to take to run it. And I just basically took them through a 3-year leadership program. And I got up one day and the whole sales process of my business took 8 days.
Wow. That reminds me.
Both of your eyes just lit up. Are you looking to sell something? What's going on?
No. I don't know that I've ever heard somebody that had so much intentionality around preparing to sell 3 years. And I think that's an incredible strategy. Well, it's a win-win for everybody.
I had no intention to sell it, but one of the things I've always been very aware of is that something's only worth what someone's prepared to pay for it. So if I'm going to build a business, somebody else needs to want it. And if my business is only designed, actually interesting enough on a coaching standpoint, if my business is only designed to run with me in it, it's worthless. So whatever I build needs to be able to be replicated with somebody else. And I think that's the challenge. If we've got people that have built great real estate businesses, but then never been able to replicate that with somebody else, it was based solely on one individual's talent. And for me, that was a lot of my theory behind this, is I've been able to replicate the things I've done with, getting into some quite large numbers of realtors now, because it's a process that can be modified to the individual. And yes, the intention was to sell it. And I think I was lucky when I got into real estate. I knew it wasn't going to be my career forever. I saw real estate as a great way for me to make a lot of money and have the freedom to be able to do the things I wanted to do when I got out. But I knew what I had to put in to get started. So the plan, it worked. And I've been able to do that with a few other companies as well. But identifying the right people. It's only worth what somebody will pay it. And I think in a real estate business, the people who know the true value are the people that are in it. And also remember that people don't follow companies, they follow people. And I think that's one of the things I learned in my business. I don't care what the brand is on the building. There's great brands out there, but it's always the leadership that keeps people connected. People will follow people. If you boys went and opened up Joe Blogg's real estate, people like you, they'll come. And I think that's the thing to remember. Hang your hat on people. not a brand. Because the brand's great, the vehicle, the wheels, the tires, the stuff. But the people that lead from the top is what defines whether a business is going to be successful.
Yeah.
The people that inspire you every day.
It reminds me, if you're interested in this topic, it reminds me of a little book called The Golden Handoff. And really that's what you're describing is a handoff of your business. And quite frankly, I bet we blew the minds of so many listeners who are running high volume businesses that listen to this podcast because they probably haven't even thought about the concept of creating a saleable real estate business. I think it's a concept just like Teams 20 years ago was this new idea. I think creating a business that you can actually sell and being intentional around your systems, your processes, the SOPs in your business, all of these different things so that you can actually create something that is saleable is huge. Could potentially change someone's life.
Outside of real estate, that's where a lot of wealth comes. You build a company, you sell it. And as a realtor, we can't sell a database unless there's been some sort of transitional phase to understand that everybody in that database knows that the whole process of what you put in place goes with it. Because if my personality and is everything that drives my business, that doesn't stay with the business. And that's why I had to transition it into a process of frequency of communication where it didn't matter who did it. The more connected you are to me and my business and my process, you'll stay with me for the experience. And I created a program many years ago called Protect the Experience. We trademarked this whole thing, which was around the experience is critical. People only refer us business based on the experience, not the result. Because if the experience is miserable, but you get me a good result, I'm not referring you business because it's the experience that damages everything. If the experience is outstanding and the result's a little bit less than I thought, I'm still going to refer you a ton of business because the experience is what we pay for. The result is the free part. The experience is what we pay all the money for.
Yeah, the result's the expectation.
Damn right. I mean, we list and sell a home for exactly what people want. They don't thank us for it. They kind of want to say, "What the hell did you do? Like, what are we paying you for?" You get an experience they never forget, and they'll never take it away from you. And that's really what I focused on was create an experience that is unique and different, but is something that can be replicated. And it's not about the person. It's about creating something for every single person that comes through your business that never, ever deviates from the way I communicate. And it didn't matter how much I liked you or not. You still got the same communication plan. You still got talked to as frequently as any client that I really liked. Granted, if I liked you a lot, we'd talk a lot more because there's more to talk about. But you never deviate from, what's the old saying? There's never a good time to lower your standards. And that was written on my wall in my office. If you think there's never a good day to do it. I mean, if that's what we do, that's what we do every day.
Yeah.
And some days are tough and some days are very easy. But the reward's phenomenal.
Thank you for spending some time with us.
Welcome.
And for the last couple minutes here, I just want to transition us.
This is where we sing. This is where we sing a song.
This is where we hold hands in kumbaya because we're in such a business
We've got
unison.
some intense eye contact going on. It's kind of weird.
Joe and I are pretty intense people. Like
We're very passionate about what we're talking about. Yeah.
I want to transition us into the last segment of our show, which is called my fingers never work. Yeah, and now we're on video. What the heck? 3, 2, 1, action. This podcast is about going all in on your life and business, and it's very action oriented. So we ask each guest the same 3 questions every episode. You're on the hot seat, rapid fire. You ready to start?
Here we go. Question number 1. Aaron, who has been the most influential person in your life and in your business and why?
My grandfather.
Okay, how so?
My grandfather, he was my hero when I was growing up as a kid. He was that dressed in a suit and a tie every day. The girls loved him. He had the best manners. He was a pilot back in many years ago. He's been gone now for 20 plus years. And when my family used to go away on vacation, I used to go and stay with my granddad. He used to build the ships in the bottle, and he taught me some really cool life lessons about how to treat people. And there's a lot of statements that he used to say to me. One of them, I'll give you a couple that he used to say. He said to me, "You should always present yourself, dress, show up, act like the next person you're about to meet is going to give you an opportunity that's going to change your life." And so that means there's never a good time to lower your standards. The other thing that he said to me is you should never, ever look at taking advice from somebody whose business you do not want to have. Because there's a lot of people that'll tell us what to do, but if you've never felt my pain or sat in my shoes, it's really, really hard to take that advice. Now, everybody's got something great to share, but it's about how far will you commit with that. And he was one of the biggest influences. And, I still hear his voice in my head now. I was very, very young when he passed away. But he taught me how to be a very genuine, authentic person. I mean, I think the thing I was more proud of in my business is that the day I started in real estate and the day I got out, I never changed who I was. I had a little funky spot in the middle, but I think for the majority of it, I never changed who I was because I knew that people want to do business. And I think sometimes we let our ego and our own self-expectations of who we are, or what we believe people should be, or think that they want us to see us as, just gets very muddled. And, he taught me some great life lessons. He goes, if you believe it, stick with it, the result will happen. And he was my hero. So
that's phenomenal. Question number 2, what is the most influential book on your business?
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's a list a mile long. It's pretty hard to name one, but I mean, I like really simple things about, execution. Funny enough, the best advice I ever got especially when I was really starting to grow some big businesses, and I've had a lot of really good mentors, and he said, you've got to learn to check yourself out of what you do. And, so I'd be at work, and then when I'd come home, I'd be reading things about business, and how would I do that? And he said, your brain never shuts down. It's like you're training for a marathon, you never stop running. Eventually something's going to break. And he said to me, the best thing you can ever do when it comes to reading is sometimes stop. Read something that checks you out of reality so you get the time to sort of refresh. So ironically, the best book I've ever read about what I do is to sit back and go, take stock of where you're at, what you've done. So I started getting into some things, science fiction, things like that, just to try and check me a bit out of reality. Because if you don't check out of what you do every day and have time to sort of digest it, it's really hard to sort of stay on top of it. There's burnout comes in. So, I mean, there's hundreds of them out there, though. I mean, God, I can't tell you how many books I've read in that, like the Who Moved My Cheese, the Purple Cow, all that sort of stuff about simplicity of seeing where it is. Yep. The list's out there. I mean, I think anything that you read has value. Just look for the message. We try to digest every word. Most books have one or two powerful punches in the face that you need to listen to. I say the day that you see that powerful punch in the face, put the book down and go and put it in play. Don't read the whole thing.
Yeah. This sounds like a good spot to put like a sponsored ad for Blinkist.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
so Blinkist will be in touch. But no, that's the second time that we've had that answer in the last like 3 or 4 episodes, which is really fascinating to me. Another highly successful agent and brokerage owner that we had on recently, Robert, said the same thing. For him, the most important thing that he reads for his business was novels.
Yeah.
And it's just something that I think not a lot of business people
Probably
necessarily.
A little side note to that too, though, is I read a lot of autobiographies on people that have overcome adversity. Because interesting, and not to get sidetracked, but people quite often ask, what do I do for motivation? What's the thing that motivates me? And this is probably where I'm a little bit different, is people always think about their dreams, and this is where I'd like to be. And for me, the motivation comes from pain. If I really want to do something really, really well, I think about a place I never want to be. I mean, we've all had rough spots in our lives, and so I always think about the worst moments that I've had, and I'll do anything I can to absolutely make sure I never go back. And so for me, that's where the motivation comes from. So when I look at overcoming adversity, I look at people that have got through things that make my life look pretty simple. Because sometimes we need a reality check of how bad things are. And most of us aren't in that situation where we can talk about loss of limbs or spending months and months being isolated on an island. I mean, we're sitting there in the real estate industry thinking our life's over because we can't get someone to call us back. Sometimes we need a reality check of how bad it is and how easy it is for us just to step over that threshold. Yeah. Anything that's a true story or a biography on someone that's overcome adversity gets my attention all the time. Love that stuff. Love it.
Nice. I'll let you read my autobiography.
No, you're signing me one. Exactly right.
All right, question number 3.
All right, third and final question. This is the All-In Podcast where we encourage and challenge our listeners to go out there and take action. So the last question we have for you today, Aaron, is after all is said and done, what is the one bit of advice that you give to our listeners today to go take action on right now?
One thing, and this is where it ties nicely into KW, because I tell you what, this is something that I've always thought about myself is, if you want to take action on anything right now, just take action on one thing. And for me, this is a strategy I've always done. With businesses like what I've got running right now, there's 100 different things that need to be done. And my strategy is I will never start number 2 until number 1's done. So I prioritize everything. And my all-in action is I will not touch the second thing until number 1's done. I mean, that's the ability to execute. You've got to teach yourself the habit. If you want to go all in, most of us think all in means just grab everything and dive in, grab one thing and go. And don't stop until it's implemented perfectly or you've eliminated it completely from your business. And that with me would be my all in.
Interesting. You're absolutely right. My philosophy has been grab all of it and go run hard as I can. And what you're saying is I only get to earn number 2 once I've accomplished number 1.
Yeah. And ironically, if you do one thing at a time, it gets done way quicker than trying to do 50 things all together.
Yeah.
Multitasking is a lie.
And that stands with a philosophy, whereas for me, this is probably the finishing note. And I believe it becomes about opportunity. And, for me, the focus about being successful is being completely present. The opportunity only exists if you're absolutely 100% in the moment. If you're thinking about what happened yesterday or where you want to be in 3 or 4 days, the thing that's actually going to change your life that's sitting right in front of you now, you're not even aware of it. Be 100% present on every single conversation, every single action that you're doing. If you're 100% connected to it, that's the only way you're going to see a result. And most of us are thinking about where we're going for dinner or what we did yesterday or what I have or haven't done. And we're missing the biggest opportunity, which is always sitting right in front of us.
So true.
Yeah.
You want to go all in? Stay in the moment. Stay present.
I feel like I said I love that like 450 times this
was a good episode. This was a good episode.
Well, I'm glad you cleared that up. I thought you were saying I love you.
Well, Aaron, thank you so much for spending some time with us. If our listeners want to find out more about you and more of your content, where can they go?
Irvine, California. They want to come over and see me personally. No,
all right.
I mean, they can visit my website, aaronhodson.com. Or contact you. I mean,
Awesome.
you've got my direct contact details. So
That's
I
right.
appreciate you guys having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure. We'll say one of the best podcasts I've been on. You guys have got it sorted out, so it's really great. Good information.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I
Great
appreciate
content.
that.
That's very kind. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for another episode of the All In Podcast. As always, Joe and I want you to go play All In.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to this episode of the All In Podcast. We want to invite you to find all of today's resources from our show page at aipodcast.co. We also ask that you take just 1 minute to leave us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. This is how we grow and how we're able to bring you the best content each and every week. Now go play All In.